You're listening to Real Investor Radio with Craig Fuhr and Jack Bevere, where we cover advanced real estate investing topics to help you stay ahead of the curve in your real estate investing business. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome back to Real Investor Radio, the podcast for advanced investors. I'm joined again by Jack Bevere. Jack, good to see you.
Absolutely. Good to see you, sir.
We have been having an awesome conversation with Eli Fisher from Audantic, a really awesome company that has been using data for real estate investors for many years now, but they've gotten it down to quite a science. And I would encourage everyone who hasn't taken a listen to the previous episode to go back and check that out and then come back to this one. Eli, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, guys.
It's good to have you, man. So great conversation previously. We're going to touch on some more features of the product, as well as sort of how the industry is changing and things that investors should be looking out for right now who may have been marketing with other things like text or PPL. So let's go ahead and jump in. Jack, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, and thanks, Eli, for joining us. Been really enjoying the conversation. Data is near and dear to my heart, and I've always been a huge fan of the company. Followed you guys super closely, and consider you guys good friends. So, by the way, there's no affiliation. Just for those who are listening, there's no affiliation here. This isn't a commercial. I just really think this is like a really cool data product, and I think that it's underutilized by a lot of the industry. I think that people, though, with ChatGPT are coming around more to hey, data is really powerful, and how might I use it in my business? There's also a lot of young people who just grew up with these ideas, and that's just this part and parcel for them. So I think that, I think 6 years ago, Chris would be I go give a presentation and I get a bunch of blank stares and a bunch of guys who are I don't really get it. Wait, it's like an Excel spreadsheet, and it's, it's expensive and it's an Excel spreadsheet, and they just didn't get it. And he gets super frustrated with that, understandably, because I thought it was the coolest thing ever and still do. And then you guys have just added features on top of it that I think have made the product even more and more powerful. So we touched on a bunch of stuff, the core product in terms of list building for lead generation in the last episode. And we talked about attribution and how powerful that is to, I really think, professionalizing your acquisition process by making sure that you can see what's happening in your market, see actually what's happening in your market, and then see how you did versus the rest of the market. There's a scorecard every quarter on that. And those are two super powerful features. Another one that you guys added more recently even is what you guys are calling Buyer Sonar. And so Eli, could you tell us what that does, what that is?
Yeah, so Buyer Sonar is a market intelligence tool that basically at the MSA level will tell you how many investor transactions occurred, so how many deals, and then the distribution of the investors that made up those deals. And so if you are looking to basically identify a better class of buyers, it's really important that you understand who pays the most for what type of product. And that's exactly what the system allows you to do, is drill down and say, okay, I have this specific product. This is the buy box. These are all the buyers that buy that type of product. Here's what they pay. And if you understand who pays the most for that type of product, there's a whole host of downstream effects. You can increase your wholesale assignment fee, but more important from that is that if you think about it from the front end acquisition, how do you get a competitive advantage? Because the reality of it is the market has shifted. There's only so many properties that are going to sell at 40, 50 cents on the dollar. And if you can only pay 40 or 50 cents on the dollar, and yet the market dictates your competitors are paying 70 cents on the dollar, that's not going to happen. So how do you fix that? Well, you get a better class of buyer. And so if you have a better class of buyers, it's no longer incumbent for you to get that stuff deep. I mean, I'm not saying you can't. I mean, a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and then. But the reality of it is that's not how you're going to scale a business. So I think looking forward here, buyers are a critical aspect. And it's really interesting because I haven't really seen a lot of organizations take a buyer-centric focus and just run with it. The irony of that is I look at the largest wholesaler in the country that does close to 30,000 transactions a year. They have been intentional from the start, and they have always just curated new buyers. And we can talk about who those types of buyers are and why that organization does 30,000 transactions. And I think it's a better business model because if you have people that pay more, you can win on the front end and then you can maximize your spread.
You talking about New Res?
No. Well, New Western, yeah.
Oh, New Western. Sorry, I said New Res.
Yeah.
Sorry, New Western. Yeah. Yeah, they've always been. We encountered them when we started buying in Atlanta. They were started in I think they started in Texas, but they've been dominated in the South, and then they really expanded nationally from there. And they were always the most frustrating people to go up against because they'd pay this what I considered this stupid number, and then they'd get out. They'd get out to 15 grand up, and I'm like, where the hell are they finding these people to buy these houses? But that's like you said, they built a machine around that, and it's been tremendously successful for them. So hey, God bless.
So Buyer Sonar, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Buyer Sonar we're talking about the disposition here. You've
wholesale dispositions, really. Wholesale dispositions,
exactly.
not homeowners, but investor wholesale. Yeah.
And in a nutshell, it allows you to see what your competitors have been able to, basically sell the house for on the back end to make their spread.
Yeah, either they're the LLC was, because maybe there's somebody who pays more than you do, right? They're a flipper, a wholesaler competing with a flipper, for example, right? Maybe there's a flipper who's just able to pay more than you because they've, there's no middleman for them, right? They've just decided to bring it in house.
Sure.
That's a customer. Maybe there's some newer money that's coming into the business, or somebody who's just, placing 1031 funds or has $1 million to deploy. But you want to sell to those folks while the getting's good, so to speak, right? And this issue is one that's near and dear to my heart, right? Because we'll put a property under contract and then we wholesale it and we make 10 grand on it, and and my guy Brian in acquisitions is freaking awesome. He's the man. So this is no dig on him, but we love to spar. So he's like, hey, I sold it to so and so, and if I know so and so's name, I'm super skeptical that we didn't leave money on the table, right? Tell me we sold it to somebody whose name I don't know, who I've never heard of, right? Because if I know their name, then that's the shark. So you sold it to a shark. Don't sell it to the shark, sell it to the fish. We're supposed to be the shark, selling to the fish, and get the maximum spread. And Buyer Sonar is an amazing tool for that because it shows you can really kind of it's even, you guys have set it up where you can even really kind of see who the sharks are and who the fish are. Who's paying the highest percentage of value. On a particular deal, you can't exactly tell, but when you aggregate someone's activity, you get a decent sense of rankings, so to speak, as to who's paying the most.
Yeah. So let's talk about the fish for a minute, okay? I asked people a question. It's in your market, who do you think makes up the majority of investor transactions? And a common answer that I hear is this institutional player. Oh, this iBuyer. And while they do a good amount of volume, that's not who actually makes up the majority of transactions. The majority of transactions are actually made up in every MSA across the country of the small mom and pop, let's just call them the HGTV investor. Okay. So when we think about that specific persona, this is an individual that on a rolling 6 to 8 month basis does between 1 to 3 deals. On a national average, they pay 86 cents and up on the dollar. So if we happen to know from a total addressable market standpoint, these people represent the largest buying class, and they just so happen to pay the most, and we have this data available at our disposal, I would argue that we should probably focus on those people for our disposition. And that's why I use New Western as a business case, because they, from the very beginning, have focused on those individuals. This is the type of guy that is not recording in an LLC. This is the type of guy that probably thinks a kitchen reno costs $5,000. God bless you, brother. We love you anyway. But those are the type of people that are wanting to get into the game. Those are the type of people that if you truly want to maximize your spread, you should be aggregating those people on a daily basis. Because if you think about it, if you constantly bring in buyers that pay a premium What happens on the acquisition side? Well, acquisition should really be a fulfillment arm for disposition. And that's why I look historically how businesses have operated in our space, and it's always acquisition gets deal, disposition moves it out. I think there's a fundamental flaw in that really, if you're constantly bringing buyers in, acquisition should just be a fulfillment arm for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
and they should be speaking to one another, basically saying, hey, look, we have fish who are willing to pay more so that we can pay more on the front end on the acquisition side.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, Jack, like the easy call would probably be to, if you've got a buyer like New Western in your back pocket and, you know, they're always looking for deals, they're flush with capital. That's an easy call to make. It fits their box. I'll make my $5 to $7 grand. I'm selling to Walmart. You know, the better call, maybe not as easy. You know, you might have to coax some of the newer buyers through the process, but you're always going to make better money, better margin with guys like that.
And if you're not, and I would say, like, as the market gets more and more competitive, as particularly in a low inventory environment, if you are not doing that, you're gonna get beat by somebody who is, right. They're just gonna outbid you, right? Like, personality goes a certain level, but like,
Sure.
At the end of the day, if you're outbid at the kitchen table, and the other person is believable that they'll close, the seller is going to probably go with that other person. So if you leave that margin on the table, that's, you know, shame on you, you know?
Yeah.
Sure, that happens.
I mean, if you can pay 40 cents and I can pay 80 cents, I can literally write my offer on a napkin and I'm going to win every time. And I think it's so critical that, you know, when people initially usually come to us for buyers, they'll see these buyers as like, well, I want the guys doing 50 some odd deals. It's like, why? You're going to take a haircut on that. That makes no sense. I understand they're going to close, but there's no margin in it for you. You know, that'd be like, you know, you go to, you know, one of these HGTV investors and say, hey, man, I can get you something off market for 10 grand under retail. That person gets excited about that. If I go to Jack and say, hey, Jack, I can get you this off market deal for 10 grand under retail, Jack's going to laugh and say, Eli, put a 1 in front of that and we'll talk.
Yeah, a lot of those folks, you know, they want to do a deal, right? They want to get into it. They just want to get their feet wet. They don't really care if they almost don't even care if they make money on the first one. They just want to like go through and like, you know, they don't want to lose money, obviously, but they just want to, like, you know, figure out their processes, try this contractor out, you know, like do one so that, you know, and it's part of the experience is just getting one under their belt. And they don't want to sit around and wait for 6 months to find one that's appropriately priced for them. Appropriately priced at all, right? And they've got no acquisitions team, so it's not like, you know, just because they're new doesn't mean they're dumb. They may just have different motivations, right? So
yeah,
Eli, why wouldn't you want to sell to that guy?
Talk about what does the user, like a Jack or whoever is using your product, what do they get in terms of the report on the buyer side? Are they getting the name of the LLC, and then they've got to skip trace who the owner of that is? Hashtag Corporate Transparency Act, Jack. Hey, by the way, those of you who haven't listened to our episode that Jack and I recorded with Doug Stein, where we talk about the Corporate Transparency Act, I would highly encourage everybody to go back and check out that episode, because it affects anybody, essentially.
Literally everybody.
Everybody that we're speaking to right now who owns an LLC or multiple LLCs. You better check out that episode. But Eli, what do folks get in terms of the report from you all? I want to know who my buyers are. I see an LLC. Are we getting email addresses? Are we getting phone numbers, names of the folks that are members of the LLC? What are we getting?
Yeah. So the goal is to give you a very robust snapshot of what that organization does. So you go into the system and you see a dashboard of all the available buyers within the market and what they actually did. So if you actually click on the buyer, we give you their whole dynamics of, okay, this is their average spread that they buy on. This is how many properties they've entered, how many have they sold, how many they do locally in the MSA, and how many they're doing outside of the MSA. So you also understand like how big an organization this truly is. Then when you look at their individual transactions, we'll show you basically on the transaction, here's the discount relative to the estimated value. So you get a real good idea of, okay, the potential spread that these guys are willing to do. We show you if they're using agents to source deals. And then, for lenders like you guys, we show you who's financing them and underwriting the deal. We can show you if this was a cash transaction that they did, or if they were using hard money in that type of transaction. And so you start to really
Jack,
understand.
we're using that data for DFS, aren't we? Yes, no?
No, not on the DFS side. We use some different stuff for that, but it's a really cool tool, though. It's a really cool, feature that helps you when you're talking about that buyer, profile who you want to call, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so then,
does it? I'm sorry, Eli. Does it tell you like the number of transactions these folks have done or are doing?
It does, and you can drill down to each individual transaction. And so the idea being is that, you can enter any type of set criteria. You may say, look, I want only in Baltimore City to see anyone that paid like 90 cents and up on the dollar. And then in addition to that has done between 2 to 4 transactions, or whatever the criteria that you enter in. Once you've drilled down on that, you can plot it on a map within the system. So you see exactly where their transactions are occurring. You can drill down further. And then you can export it. We've built an LLC skip trace, the APIs into 5 different databases. I mean, the entity resolution layer is very robust. And so we'll show you the registered agent. We'll show you the emails and phone numbers that are associated with that organization. And at that point, the organization should just pick up the phone and call those people. And I've tested this personally. I've done a number of case studies on it. And it's not really a difficult conversation. And I can give you a couple examples, because if I saw Jack picked up 555 Baker Street, my first conversation to Jack's like, hey, Jack, this is Eli. I saw you picked up 555 Baker Street. Was that your deal? Yeah. Okay, cool. Also see you did 62 Adams. Jack, let me ask you a question right here. Are you looking for off-market product? That's how you start the conversation, and then you can take it a step further. You build upon this. Like, how do we curate this interest? Well, because you have the emails of these individuals, you take their most recent transaction. If you're going to send them an email, you put that as the subject line, ? So, Jack, if I send you an email that says 62 Adams, ? and that was your most recent transaction, are you going to open that email?
It's super high open rate, I'm sure.
I would probably put, you just bought 62 Adams, Jack, and then I know he would open it at that point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And so this is how, it's not necessarily difficult to reach out and engage these individuals. You just have to have the validity of having the data, because if you know their business inside out, you understand their buy box, they're going to take your conversation pretty serious, because it's like, this guy, he seems to know more about my business. I don't know how he knows this, but whatever he's doing, he's probably dialed in right here, and it's probably worth my time to have a conversation with him.
I've always thought that the best wholesalers know their buyers' business better than they do. And I actually have friends around the country who, they call it reverse wholesaling, where you basically go out and find the buyer first, you find out what their buy box is, and then you just go out and target the crap out of that buy box. And you've got a ready buyer right there, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's great stuff. So is Buyer Sonar sort of part of the standard suite that a user like Jack at Dominion gets, or is that sort of an add-on product for you guys?
No, it's included. I always let people know, think of us as a holistic solution, in that we give you best-in-class data on the front end from the acquisition standpoint, so you can pick up that deal. But then how can I help maximize your spread? Well, I can do that in 2 ways. One, the attribution aspect of it, to help you improve your conversion at the marketing stage, as well as the acquisition stage, to understand where the fallout happens in that. Then on the back end right here with the disposition, if I can empower you to connect with a best-in-class buyer that will pay the premium, these are the 3 steps that we can utilize to help you maximize your spread on a deal. And so it's actually included, and it's a part of the system.
That's great.
Yeah, super cool. All right, you want to? There was one other topic we wanted to jump into that I was ignorant on, and I was you and Craig were talking prior to us getting started. I'm really interested in that. Could you explain to us what the changes in the industry are? I guess we're rewind a year or so in terms of the texting and the FCC's actions on that stuff, and bring us up to date and what's about to happen, which was I was unaware. So I'm excited to share this information.
Yeah. So for the people that are listening to this podcast, I see a unique opportunity that's currently available within the market to gain more market share. The reason I say that is because there's a whole host of competitors, and let's call them what they are. You're small, not sophisticated wholesaler. You know, the guy that watched a YouTube video that thinks he's going to be sitting on a beach and getting checks in his mailbox. It's not reality, but that dream is sold on a daily basis. So if we think about those types of individuals, there's probably two channels that were very prevalent for them. And the first was texting. So we saw, up until about August of this last year, guys were just blasting out text messages. Now, there had been what was called the 10 DLC regulations. And a lot of people think that that was actually like a law. It wasn't. 10 DLC was basically a industry standard that was put in place by the large wireless carriers. And the reason why that was put in place is if you understand what 10DLC was in 10DLC.org, that's actually a lobbying function for the wireless carriers to prevent federal regulation saying that, okay, we're going to regulate ourselves, and these are the standards of how we're going to regulate texting. Most people never even bothered to go to 10DLC.org and actually read what the regulations stated around texting. In particular, it basically stated that you can't really be doing cold texting. People have to opt in to be receiving these types of texts, and you also have to include language to allow people to opt out. So for the last couple of years, nobody was adhering to that. So you'd have these providers and these wholesale users were just blasting out text. Well, something interesting happened. In August, carriers started putting strict enforcement into place. And you literally saw texting almost die overnight because all of a sudden there was a compliance layer that needed to be occurring within the industry. And I'll tell you a funny story about that, of why this happened. So I live out in Redmond, Washington, right next to T-Mobile's U.S. headquarters. So we do a barbecue bus stop at the beginning of the school year. And one of the individuals that lives in my neighborhood is an executive at T-Mobile. We start talking about texting. And he doesn't know that I work in the real estate industry, but he talks about, they've qualified a certain group of users that are sending texts, and what they call them is nuisance industries, meaning they're just a headache. We don't make any money off of them, and they are a pain for a user experience. So we're taking steps to eliminate that pain. And now you see the strict enforcement. And so now texting is not really a viable channel for people that are trying to do cold outreach. So that pretty much died up overnight. And so then that opened a gap in the market. Because if you think about it, there was all this noise that was in the system, people sending all these texts. Well, that kind of disappeared overnight.
2021 was crazy. I just got blasted all year long, right?
Yeah. So now that market share is opened up, well, what happened with those wholesalers that were using it as their primary channel of marketing? Well, they didn't ever have the capital to do direct mail, and they didn't have the ability to set up robust cold calling. So what we saw in the data is there's this actually big shift over to PPL, pay per lead. And so the effect of that was all of a sudden these PPL leads, they started getting really bid up. So they're almost accelerating their own demise because they're just bidding up the cost of PPL and getting a diminished return on that. What are
some examples of PPL like that that the listener can relate to?
Yeah, so think of it like a website like a Need to Sell My Home Fast for Cash. So these guys are constantly running ads online, and if somebody types into Google, sell my home for cash, they're ranking at the top. The person submits their information to the PPL provider. PPL provider then sells that to whoever is bidding up on that specific area. But then they also are selling it over and over and over again. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why this is so interesting here is that right around Christmas, the FCC stepped in and said, hey, we're going to put some regulations in place here that are going to have profound impact on PPL selling, not just for our side, but also for the mortgage industry and a whole host of other industries. What the federal guidance said was that, first of all, for people's information, if somebody is going to submit their information, the consumer now gets to choose who my information goes to. So I can pick, this company, but it's not going to everybody. In addition to that, if you really understand how these PPL guys were making a lot of their money, they were reselling leads over and over and over again. It was really a cash cow, right? The federal guidance also said, guess what? You can no longer resell leads. So what's going to happen? Well, strict enforcement from the government is going to start taking place in April and May. So for all these people that are buying PPL, that cost per lead is going to skyrocket and go through the roof to the point where they're not going to be able to afford it. Now, you could argue that the quality of those leads is probably going to go up, but that industry is going to fundamentally change. And so if we follow kind of the path that I've laid out here, texting went away. We saw a drop in wholesalers. The people that remained that did not have a robust business have dumped a ton of resources into PPL. Those people are going away. And unfortunately, most of the people that utilize that resource have no clue in hell what I am talking about right now, because they don't bother to read these regulations. They don't stay up on this stuff. So there's going to be a window of time for an opportunity for guys like yourself to gobble up that market share because less noise is leaving and going out of the system.
Eli, what are you seeing in terms of cold calling and the regulations surrounding that? I mean, I know guys that are still doing quite a bit of cold calling, and you know, to the best of my knowledge, a lot of it feels illegal. But what are you seeing with that?
Yeah, it probably is illegal. So if you understand from a regulatory standpoint, you know, we've gotten to a point where there's a lot of consumer rights advocacy going on. You know, we look at 10DLC. Even if something may not be federally illegal, there's a lot of industry regulation that is being applied. 10DLC is the perfect example of that, of where the wireless carrier said, we will regulate ourselves so that the feds don't step in. So I think you're going to continue to see an acceleration to more of a consumer-centric approach from regulation that will have impacts downstream on that as well. So I would not be surprised to see that there's continued scrutiny when it comes to cold calling, of who you can cold call, what you can say, and it just becomes incumbent upon the organization to make sure that they're aware of what changes are current in the market, what is on the horizon, and then really future-proof your business. Because there's going to be an opportunity, but you don't want to be left holding the bag like a lot of these people that we just talked about.
So lead reselling is going to be just straight up outlawed.
Yeah.
That's wild. And that's April, where that enforcement's supposed to take effect.
Yeah, you can go and read the FCC's decision if you want to go and read on a government website. So they're planning strict enforcement to begin the April-May timeframe.
And then when a consumer goes into a mortgage website or a Sell My House Fast website and they input their information, they're going to there's gonna be a little drop down and be like, you can share my information with Bank of America and Rocket Mortgage, but that's it. Like, there's gonna be 10 choices and you can select the 2 that you're interested in sharing that information with, like affirmatively choosing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so you think about who gets to play in that game. Not the small to medium-sized guy.
My sense is that, yeah, I mean, if it's going to be that granular, where I go into a mortgage website and, you know, maybe it's a big lead gen type website, there's so many of them out there, and I only want to share my data with 2 providers, I saw it more as, I don't want to share my data with anyone, or yes, you can share my data with everyone. Maybe it will become at some point more granular, but yeah.
So many of the consumers that go into those things, they think that they're talking to a lender, right? They think they're talking to a lender and getting a quote. They have no idea that they're just giving information that's then going to be brokered out. That's the issue, right? Because then they get particularly in the mortgage business, they get bombarded. You know, you request a mortgage quote, and then you can't get rid of calls for like 90 days because these guys are just blasting you with outreach because you've shared your information. That's where that's where the crackdown's coming from, right?
Yeah. You know, I'll give you an example. When my wife and I first bought our home, I went on to, I won't say the company's name, but basically you would enter your home, and it's like there's home services. Like, I need, some, handy work done, right? Maybe I need some gutters or something like that put up. So I enter my name, and it's like, oh, we're going to help connect you with some curated partners that are vetted and best-in-class partners. That was not the case. To Jack's point, my wife and I got hounded, text, calls, and I only needed to talk to maybe 1 or 2 guys, but I got everybody and their dog. Some were good. The vast majority were not. And for 6 months, This was just like a 1-day project, and I'm still
Right.
being inundated for 6 months after the fact. So this is where this type of regulation starts to come into place because of those types of experience from a consumer standpoint.
That's super interesting. Yeah.
How
So
about
to your point, it's gonna make it so that the a la carte lead buyer, right, is just not, that just disappears. And so it's going to be much more of a, you run your own direct mail campaign or you don't get to play, or you run your own direct mail campaign, right? Or you're on television, or you're in like kind of like more classical media, or you're just not going to be able to get leads. And yeah, that's definitely got a barrier to entry that is going to make it difficult for smaller competitors. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so Eli, one more question I wanted to ask you before we let you go. When you read the news and you're trying to find that niche market, that niche list that you feel like, oh, there's a real opportunity that's growing in this sort of niche. I'm just wondering how Audantic sort of caters to that. So lately, Jack and I were talking several episodes ago about sort of the Airbnb bust that everyone has, that felt like earlier, maybe about 4 months ago, it's kind of heavy in the news, where there's certain markets around the country where you got relatively inexperienced operators who thought they would like the real estate business, discovered that they were in the hotel business, and maybe their houses aren't doing as well as they had hoped. So I saw that as a real opportunity that may have been emerging for targeting folks that are in that particular segment of real estate investing. Is that something that, if I'm a guy, I want to get right out on the forefront of that? Is that something that you help your users with, or no?
Not specific for that instance. Well, I do think there is a large opportunity for that, because you had a lot of people that just, oh, I'm going to do this, and this is really simple. Um, Unfortunately, that's not how life is. So I would say, yeah, Craig, there's a massive opportunity right there for people that had purchased that type of product, that don't know what they're doing, that are they're playing the game faces of pain on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly think there's a large opportunity there. I think the other thing that's really interesting here is, where does the opportunity lie moving forward? And if we look at the market right here, Fed's forward guidance here is probably 3 rate cuts within the year. If you look at NAR's numbers, for 100 basis points drops, you have 5 million more available buyers that come into the market. So, historically, from an economic standpoint, when you would have rates come up, prices would come down. That didn't really happen. And we're supply side constrained. So if there's not a lot of product currently in the marketplace, you may be able to say that when those rates come down, the guy that was locked in at that lower mortgage rate, that did not want to move to an inferior class of product because he's going to be paying 7%, well, now maybe he might move. So there's a hope that there will be some inventory that comes to market, but is it going to be, are you going to be able to get, much of a discount on that? I don't think that's the case. Now, that's why I think it becomes even more incumbent for an operator to be constantly curating new buyers, because there's always opportunity in any market, but you have to understand what the market is telling you. If the market says this product trades at this, you have to have buyers that will empower you to buy it at that. So I do think there is opportunity moving forward, but you have to recognize what that opportunity is and be strategic about how you structure your business to cater to that opportunity.
Yeah, you mentioned Richmond, Virginia earlier, and I think we have a mutual friend down there who has been targeting owners of basically landlords who own, newer landlords who own, say, 10 houses and are now experiencing the joys of landlording and discovering that it's not very joyful for them. And so this particular investor in that area was targeting that list of folks, and I would assume that you might know who I'm talking about. But is that something that you guys would like? Is that the way Audantic can work for a guy who's very specialized and trying to get out on the forefront of maybe an opportunity?
Yeah, in some instances, I would say yes. The reason being is, you always have to look at what is the total addressable market for that specific type of product and the people that hold that product. So I'll give you an example. In that case, as well as another large investor who's a friend of Jack and I's out in Portland. He actually lives in Phoenix now. But he came to us and said, look, I want to see anybody that's holding, 10 plus units in a specific area. Generate that data set. He's like, this is awesome. It's like, you guys should sell this. And I'm like, here's the thing, man. Talk to me in 5 years, because that doesn't turn over very much. I can't really productize that. I can generate that set because you're a buddy. You've been with us a long time. But, there is opportunity in that stuff, but it's not really something that we can productize.
Sure.
And it's just more of something like, if Jack comes to us and says, hey, could you probably do this? We probably could do that. But those are very unique instances. And it's not something that's really, we do at scale for everybody.
What are you laughing about, Jack?
Craig, I've tried over the years. I've been in Chris's ear. Like I used to be in Chris's ear on every 4 months with a new harebrained scheme based off of some interesting opportunity. And I think that the ideas were valid, but he was like, yeah, no, and I'd get him right. Like Chris has got a little bit of shiny object syndrome to him. So I might, I could get him sometimes. I'd rope him in and I'd be like, no, man, this is a great idea. This is the future. And then he would eventually calm down and realize that and come back, realize that he was trying to run a business here and I was just trying to toss shiny objects at him. And something that I think Audantic has done extremely well over the years is sticking to their core product, their core knitting, and then expanding. I think that the addition of attribution and the addition of Buyer Sonar to the core data product really kind of completes the life cycle, as Eli pointed out. And they've been really impressively disciplined about not getting distracted with chasing a bunch of shiny objects, which are valid in and of themselves, but like Eli pointed out, not really a business.
Yeah, and I guess as you're talking about that, we all wake up at night going, oh, there's this, I've got a great new idea about motivated, this motivated part of the market, right? And my sense is that you guys are probably already capturing that, in the list that you provide to your end users.
Yeah.
Whether it be, hey, I've got it, guys. I'm thinking of targeting Airbnb guys, or I'm thinking of targeting tired landlords. My sense is that if it's a real estate investment in a single family asset class, that fits the attribution model that you've put in place, that you're probably capturing a lot of those owners in that data set, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you can never necessarily speak in absolutes, because we may have an Airbnb guy that is struggling that will sell a product to an investor at a discount. Mr. Airbnb guy looks fundamentally different than our drywaller guy example earlier. Both are good targets. And that's why in some instances, people really struggle when I explain this to them, because they always want to whittle it down and say, okay, Eli, yeah, I got what you're saying. What are the top 5 things that make somebody a good target? I'm like, it doesn't work that way. We're looking at millions of pieces of data. And the only way that we're able to glean statistical relevance, you can't do it with a person, a team of people. That is why we use machine learning models to be able to effectively do this at scale, to glean statistical relevance, to say, Mr. Airbnb guy here, based on what's going on in his life and struggles that he's had, he will sell to an investor. Mr. Drywall over here, based on what's going on in his life, based on the data, he will sell to an investor. They look fundamentally different, and yet both are good targets that will ultimately transact to an investor. And so I would love it if I could simplify it down to these are the top 5 things. But unfortunately, that's not how this works.
Sure.
So the by the way, just to just put a finer point on that, the ML, machine learning, is going to use clustering around particular when it finds that there is a correlation. It'll cluster that data will cluster, and then it'll essentially create a profile, right? The data creates a profile. So if Airbnb sellers become a thing, that will emerge within the data as a new cluster, and then the model will then identify hey, here are the other ones that you should now, and next quarter's list will now have a bunch of those kinds of individuals on it. So you won't be the first guy to buy an Airbnb off a distressed Airbnb person, but as soon as that trend emerges, the data will identify that trend and then add it to your list to then go target. So it's almost like you don't have to come up with a whole harebrained schemes, right? Like you come up with an idea, you mail it, and you get bubkiss because you're wrong or you're early, right? You're either wrong or you're early. It's usually the two things, right? And that doesn't do you any good. This approach kind of avoids that, right? Like as soon as it becomes a thing, it'll be in your wheelhouse. It'll be on your list. And you don't have to be the one who's coming up with the new novel theory of motivated selling given the economic conditions. The data will just send you to that cluster as it emerges.
Yeah. And that's where, if you think back to how we opened our conversation in the first episode, we talked about how we basically monitor every single real estate transaction on a daily basis that's occurring within the US. By ingesting that data, that is always feeding back into the model to glean exactly what Jack just described.
Eli, how many users are on the platform right now?
So we don't work with everybody. We don't want to be a propster in a batch. We have about 250, clients that are what we consider probably the top 1% within the marketplace, best in class operators. Because the thing is, you can have best in class data, but if you can't act upon it because you don't have good systems and processes, this is not a resource for you. Our founder, who you guys are good friends with, he's got a favorite saying. It's like, look, man, we make Jordans. That doesn't necessarily make you Jordan.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I love that. So what
he's
you're saying,
he's not wrong.
So you're saying 250 users across the country, which means that in any given market or MSA, you may only have just a few users that you're allowing onto the platform.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, I've always said that real estate investors need data. Great real estate investors need even better data. And it's been a real pleasure to talk with you, Eli, and learn more about Audantic. Jack, this has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, Eli, thanks a lot for joining. Really enjoyed it, man. Thank you very much.
Eli, why don't you give us, if folks want to learn more about Audantic, how can they find out and reach out?
Yeah, real simple. You just basically can go to our website, audantic.com, and there's a submit get information form. And basically, we'll just have a conversation, basically market consult. Like usually what I'll show people is just like, okay, well, what is your business? What do you do? Okay, cool. Here's the total addressable market in your area. Here's what people pay. And here's where, we may be able to be a resource for you. So, no obligation or anything like that. I think, giving people a better understanding of what's actually happening in their marketplace and then saying, okay, here's where the opportunity lies. Here's how we can potentially make this optional or operational for you. And then, just visit us at the site, and happy to be a resource for anybody.
And it's Audantic, Audantic.com.
Yeah, Audantic.com.
Well, Eli, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. You've given us so much of your time today. Really, thank you so much. It's been a genuine pleasure to learn about what you guys are doing over there.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right, guys, this has been Real Investor Radio with Craig Fuhr and Jack Bevere. Fantastic couple of episodes. Tune in for the next. We'll see you soon.